The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Right-wingers, particularly in Texas, are going bonkers because ISIS, the Islamic State, has claimed responsibility for the weekend attack near Dallas, Texas, where there was this contest, a Mohammed cartoon drawing contest. And right-wingers are saying, look at that, ISIS in Texas, Drudge Report splashed all over the front page. There was an audio statement on the extremist group's Al Bayan radio station, which said that the two perpetrators in the shootings at the Mohammed cartoon contest in Garland, Texas, were soldiers of the Caliphate, and that they were carrying out the attacks in the name of ISIS, and that they would deliver further attacks in the future. The problem with this, Lewis, is that it is certainly working to inflame the right-wingers, but there's no actual evidence that the two individuals involved had any actual connection to any ISIS group.
Yeah, and this is interesting because usually a group like Al-Qaeda, they don't normally take responsibility for things they didn't do, but it seems that ISIS is willing to do that.
There's a couple possibilities, right? Possibility one is these two individuals were ISIS agents, whatever that term even means today, and that they were in direct contact with ISIS leadership, whoever that is determined to be for those particular individuals, and that they carried this attack out under the sort of guidance of ISIS. The second possibility is that these two individuals had sort of pledged allegiance to ISIS in a nebulous sense, and did not have any actual contact, and now ISIS is saying these were agents acting on our behalf. And the third possibility is that these individuals had nothing whatsoever to do with ISIS or anybody involved with the Islamic State, and that ISIS is just taking this as a PR opportunity.
I think they'll take any PR opportunity they get. I mean, I think if these guys... it's kind of a weird organization in that basically anyone who says they're part of ISIS is part of ISIS. And so that could be the case here.
I'm actually afraid of the fanatical Texas right-wingers and what they're going to do once they start seeing the headlines on websites like Drudge Report about ISIS in Texas. That's what really scares me. And Garland, Texas is actually an anti-Muslim epicenter. There was this conference called Stand with the Prophet Against Violence and Hate in Garland, Texas. And it was a conference designed to sort of be a Muslim conference against violence by Muslims. It was a completely peaceful, great thing. And the Muslims that showed up in Garland were greeted with signs saying, "You are not Americans, don't fly our flag. We pay our taxes to that school and I don't want them here." One woman was quoted as saying, LaVonna Martindale. Another protester called Greg McKinley said, "We're here to stand up for the American way of life from a faction of people who are trying to destroy us." So it's almost like an anti-Muslim epicenter there.
And we covered a story maybe 6 months ago. I forget how long, but there was a story in or outside of Dallas where a Muslim man was just shot up in his front yard for no reason. And I think, unfortunately, after this, we might see things like that happen again.
Yeah, no actual evidence that there was any true ISIS link to these attacks. That doesn't rule out the possibility. But of course, we see the right just absolutely they're apoplectic over what's going on in terms of ISIS trying to claim responsibility here. We've talked for a long time about First Amendment confusion among the American right. What is the First Amendment? If a business, for example, fires an employee because they do something offensive, does that violate the First Amendment? Of course not. It's a business that doesn't want to have an employee there that is bad for their business. If somebody says something on the radio and viewers are offended so that the business then doesn't want to renew that radio host's contract, that has nothing to do with the violation of the First Amendment, because the government is not in any way abridging speech. The United States Constitution also explicitly provides for the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Common constraints on the right to assemble include where you can do it, the manner in which you do it, the time of day, if there are noise ordinances, for example. And a second type of constraint on the right to peaceably assemble can be that you might need a permit, right? In certain parts of the country, you need to have a permit. Those are the restrictions on the right to assemble. And in response to the protests in Baltimore, there's a Maryland Republican delegate named Patrick McDonough who went on the radio and said it's a great idea to take away welfare benefits from the parents of children who decide to protest, like, for example, food stamps. I have the audio for you. These are the Republicans who claim to defend the Constitution, saying, hey, you know what? Here's an idea. If you're a parent who receives food stamps, if your kids protest an action which is protected by the Constitution of this country that these individuals claim to defend, we'll cut your food stamps. Let's take a listen.
Here is Rick in Dundalk. Rick, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning. Hey, I'm just curious, the people that could be identified and stuff, and if they're too young, why can't they take away benefits from families, from like the parents who are collected from like welfare, whatever it is?
Sure. Yeah, that's an idea, and that could be legislation. I think if you could make a case that there is a failure to do proper parenting,
right, and
allowing this stuff to happen, is there an opportunity for a month to take away your food stamps or to take away, but it's a form of punishment where I'll tell you, it'll never get past the legislature because it seems a little bit harsh.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit harsh to say, oh, your kids are protesting? Yeah, no food for you. That seems a little bit harsh, Lewis, I think.
I love this. Someone who is very active politically, seeming to have no understanding of the Constitution or our most basic freedoms. Like just extrapolate this and imagine what the country would be like if this guy decided everything.
Yeah, a Republican wants to use the protests in Baltimore as an excuse to hurt poor people even more, and to do it on the basis of a constitutionally protected activity, peaceably assembling. There's a long track record in Baltimore of policy of systemic police brutality, ignoring the plight of the poor. People decide to activate, right, after the death of Freddie Gray, after an apparently illegal arrest, as we've now learned, almost all peacefully exercising their constitutional right to assemble. And a Republican says, let's take away the welfare benefits from parents of the kids who might be protesting. What happened to supporting the Constitution above all else?
You know what? This is a two-parter, too, because there's also the implication that all of these people are on food stamps and are getting welfare.
Of course.
So there's that as well.
People want to talk about parenting in the context of Baltimore. I think one of the biggest parenting failures that we see around the United States today is when kids end up racist, when kids end up homophobic, or with a total lack of empathy for others' plight. That's the parenting crisis I'm seeing, Lewis. And it's not going to be remedied by saying, oh, you're angry now? Let's take away your food. That rarely gets anybody to calm down if that's the goal.
It's completely absurd. And of course, it's never going to happen. But it shocks me that even if you're thinking this, that you're dumb enough to say it.
All right, former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina is running for president. She recently blamed environmentalists for California's drought. She is a failed 2010 Senate candidate, and she announced her presidency yesterday saying, quote, I think I'm the best person for the job because I understand how the economy actually works. Yeah, she does, right? As the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, she oversaw thousands, tens of thousands of layoffs. She came out of it with around a $20 million golden parachute. This is a sad reality of how the economy works, but she should not be rewarded for understanding and taking advantage of that, Lewis.
Well, maybe now she knows exactly what not to do, and she's learned an important lesson.
So huge layoffs when she was during her tenure at Hewlett-Packard. The company announced it would dismiss somewhere between 18 and 30,000 people. They posted huge losses. She departed the company with a $21 million severance package. She was listed by InfoWorld as one of the worst tech flops of all time. Carly Fiorina's tenure as CEO of Hewlett-Packard is listed by InfoWorld as one of the worst tech flops of all times, known as the anti-Steve Jobs from that article. She might be the worst candidate so far. She basically sees people as expendable, right? Lay people off, ship jobs to China. She can increase her salary. She can buy the boats and the airplanes. She's actually, in a way, the sort of perfect Republican candidate. She's like a vulture capitalist Mitt Romney to the nth power. I still declare her campaign dead on arrival, though.
Agreed. I think I just don't like the notion that because you have been successful, or in her case, unsuccessful in the business world, or just because you held an important position in the business world, that you somehow are a good fit for president.
Well, I asked Babe Buchanan that when she was advising the Romney campaign. I said to her, what evidence from history can you cite that tells us that good business people make good presidents? And she could cite nothing. She had nothing. She tried to change the subject. That's absolutely the right question. And if being a good business person doesn't translate to being a good president, then what about being a bad business person? I think that's a really fair question. On the other hand, the Bernie Sanders campaign is off to an explosive start. He really is building a sort of mini progressive movement, reportedly signing up 175,000 campaign volunteers already, raising more than $1.5 million in the first 24 hours after announcing his presidential run. This is really a lot. If you look at some of the other individuals, Marco Rubio raised $1.25 million the day after announcing his campaign. Ted Cruz raised $1 million. Rand Paul raised somewhere between $750,000 and $1 million. Bernie Sanders is off to a good start.
He is, but this still, I think it's too early to be able to determine anything, right?
It is. Right now, he has a 7% support in the presidential primary polls.
But it is nice to know that he does have support. I think he's going to be my guy, and I think he'll add a lot to the conversation. But let's be realistic here. Is he going to beat Hillary?
Yeah. So I got some emails. I want to wait until the next segment to talk about that. I got some angry emails, Lewis, from us from our taking a sort of realist approach to the Bernie campaign, and I want to address that in the next segment. What we can say is that regardless of what ultimately happens, Bernie Sanders could really stimulate a true progressive movement and actually get on the national stage what an actual progressive looks like, not Republican light, which has become the sort of calling card of mainstream moderate Democrats over the last 10 to 12 years in this country. But he could really show us this is actually a progressive.
I think he will. I think the country needs to see that. I guess it's not going to hurt.
All right. Next, we are going to do Election Tuesday 2016. We have new candidates. And in that context, we will talk about, should we be realistic about Bernie? Should we be optimistic about Bernie? Are they the same thing, or are those two very different things? Make sure to follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman, and send me your thoughts about Bernie.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
After last week's huge announcement about the future expansion of the show and the move to Boston, Massachusetts, we got a bunch of great emails from people interested in being investors in the show, interested in making donations, but also a lot of people saying they want to donate some memberships. So we're putting together a list of people who are subsidizing memberships down to half price like we've done in the past. We'll have an announcement over the next, probably the next day or two, about a new membership special that'll be a half price one, subsidized by some very generous members. Today's member of the day is Richard Bongiorno. Good day to you, my friend. I don't know what else to say, but thank you to Richard for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Richard at davidpakman.com/membership. People loving the bonus show. That is the most popular member perk. The bonus show is world famous, Lewis. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, it's Tuesday, and we are doing Election Tuesday 2016. What we're doing is every Tuesday, if there have been new candidates that declared since the prior Tuesday, we will go through who we would vote for if the election were held today and who would we vote for from the other party if the election were held today. So last time we just had Hillary on the Democratic side, Cruz, Rubio, and Rand Paul on the Republican side. We now, on the Democratic side, have Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and new players have entered the Republican side as well. We have Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Marco Rubio, with the new additions of Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson. My choice, if the election were today, would be Bernie Sanders, absolutely no question, the most progressive of the bunch. Just not even a contest for me, Lewis. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty clear for the rest of the election that there's really no one who can replace Bernie Sanders, who could take over his spot as our candidate. But,
we will see.
We will see. Anything can happen. I suppose I could run for president, and then of course I would be my first pick. But yes, Bernie Sanders.
On the Republican side, last time we did this, I thought that all three candidates at the time were so horrible that I would just choose the most likely to inflict the least damage to the country. And at that time, I said that I thought it was Marco Rubio. With the addition of Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson, is there a candidate that I would like the most? So today, I said I'm going to focus on the individual closest to my views. Closest. That doesn't mean that they're close to my views. And right now, that individual is Rand Paul. And I disagree with Rand Paul on so much, but he does oppose expanding the military-industrial complex. He does favor a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. He doesn't think that stricter punishments reduce crime when it comes to the criminal justice system. And he does want to stay out of Iran for now. And he does support early voting, even though he also supports voter ID. And he is big-time anti-lobbyist. So if I knew it would be one of the Republicans, I would probably, it's hard for me to even say this. It's making me feel a little bit nauseous, but I would probably pick Rand Paul.
That's what I said last time as well. It would be Rand Paul. I think he's also, of the candidates we have here on the Republican side, I think he's also the most qualified. Unfortunately, even though he wrote that piece about the Koch brothers,
he's against lobbyists, but the Koch brothers just happen to be great people who inspire democracy.
Hey, look, if you're a Republican and you want to be president, you probably need their help. So I'm still going with Rand Paul if it had to be a Republican.
All right. Last time Lewis and I did not agree. This time we do agree. Every Tuesday we will analyze, are there new candidates? And if so, how do our choices, how are they altered? A Florida jury took only 15 minutes to find a couple guilty of having sex on a Bradenton, Florida beach. The convictions carry a maximum prison sentence of 15 years. 40-year-old Jose Caballero and Alyssa Alvarez, who's 20 years old, were charged with 2 counts each of lewd and lascivious behavior for having sex on a public beach in July of 2014. There was video played in the courtroom during the trial, and it showed Alvarez moving on top of the man in a sexual manner in broad daylight, and witnesses also testified that a 3-year-old girl saw them. Both of them will now have to register as sex offenders. A sentencing date hasn't yet been announced. Apparently, the punishment for the man is expected to be more severe than for the woman because the man has a prior record that involves a cocaine trafficking conviction, whereas the woman doesn't. So there is the old prison system of the United States. First, you go to prison for trafficking drugs, right? Which only exists in great part because of the entire war on drugs, prison industrial complex, the drastic, embarrassing problems with incarceration we have. And then, because you were imprisoned by the failed war on drugs, you get a harsher sentence for the nonviolent crime of consensual sex. To contextualize this, Lewis, to contextualize the 15-year maximum sentence, I'll remind you that a Kansas man was recently sentenced to only 10 years after pleading no contest to aggravated battery, involuntary manslaughter, and child abuse, which was connected to the death of an 18-month-old girl. And we're looking at a 15-year maximum sentence here. Not to mention, imagine the impact of being labeled sex offenders for life now.
Yeah, I think that would be enough. I don't think that that prison time should be on the table here. I understand the sex offender charge, but This is just stupid, right? I mean, it's just a stupid thing to do when you know that charge could be levied against you.
Well, maybe you don't. I mean, a lot of people online, a lot of people were saying, it's crazy in Florida. This wouldn't be the same in my state or in my country. And if you actually look, there are very similar laws in many states and in many countries. So I don't think it's that crazy for people not to know that there could be serious criminal penalties merely for having sex. And remember, witnesses didn't even see genitalia or penetration, not in person, not in the video. So this 3-year-old girl saw gyration, I guess. I'm not making a value judgment as to whether 3-year-olds should be or should not be seeing people having sex. But what I'm saying is, all there was some gyration, which the 3-year-old maybe even remotely understood. Sex offender registry and up to 15 years in prison seems ludicrous.
Well, I'm still not completely sold on the sex offender thing being ludicrous. I have to think about that, but I can agree with you that prison time is completely insane here.
A woman is going to become a New York City firefighter in spite of having failed a fitness test. And the New York Post, which is an affiliate of News Corporation, which is the parent company of Fox News, put out a frantic article saying for the first time ever, the New York Fire Department is going to allow someone who failed a crucial physical fitness test to join the bravest. It's about Rebecca Wax, who's 33 years old, set to graduate today from the fire academy, and she didn't pass something called the functional skills training test. This is like an obstacle course, job-related tasks performed with limited air supply and all of your firefighter gear on. And upon graduation, she would be allowed to be assigned to a firehouse and tasked with the full duties of a firefighter. And critics are saying the administration, FDNY, is making exceptions and lowering their standards. And some other FDNY members, speaking on the condition of anonymity, are also angry, Lewis, saying, wait, she didn't pass, and now she's going to be sent into fires with us, and she's not 100% qualified? This is insane. Allegations of feminist activism that's at play here. Except there is something else to consider here, which is that this test was only recently added. This test is sort of an experiment, right? It's pretty disingenuous for the Post to say this is the only person who will be a firefighter who has never passed this test, when it's only been a requirement for 6 years. Anyone who's in FDNY and has been for more than 6 years has not passed this test. Would they also not be qualified to serve, Lewis? Because they passed the exact same tests that Rebecca Wax did pass, other than this new test.
Well, here's what I think about this. It's something they have had in place that long. Okay, the people who over 6 years ago got grandfathered in, that's fine. The department could always make them take it again. If they are having trouble with recruiting in general, if they are having lower numbers and they need more people, then I can understand them making an exception here. However, this is a very physical job, and other people's lives could rely on your physical prowess. And the test is in place for a reason.
Well, it's not. That's the thing. It's not clear that it is. This is a test that goes above and beyond the standards of most of the country, including other big cities. So if the argument is, well, New York is so different that they need a different test, there are only, as you mentioned, if there's a recruiting issue, 44 of the over 10,000 firefighters in FDNY are female. And she did pass the tests that would qualify her to be an FDNY firefighter in New York up to 6 years ago when they started this sort of experiment. And she did pass the tests that would allow her to be a firefighter in just about any part of the country. So we can have a discussion about an exception being made. That's a fair discussion. But the frantic New York Post article about how this is the only person in FDNY who will be a firefighter without having passed that test is very misleading.
That does seem to be misleading, yes. And, if they see something in her, if she really excelled in every other aspect of what it takes to be a firefighter, then it seems perfectly reasonable for an exception to be made. Of course, she did pass this test. It just took longer than the limit they put on it.
That's another note. That's actually true, which technically is a failure, right? Because part of the test is completing it in a certain amount of time, but not at all what the New York Post wants you to believe. Send me your thoughts on this one. I know people will have a lot to say.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's a pleasure to have back on the program Dr. Faheem Younus, who's a member of the executive body of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA and a senior fellow at the Hoffberger Center for Ethics at the University of Baltimore. It's great to have you back on. You know, we talked last week, this story involving Pam Geller's group, which wanted to put some ads on New York City buses, which had different quotes attributed to Muslims. They also had advertisements with the phrase Hamas killing Jews, etc. And you actually debated Pam on the Sean Hannity program. What was your, talk to me about, I guess, so we understand your general view. What was your reaction to the desire to place these ads?
Thank you very much for having me, David. First of all, I think everybody knows, and that's what I wanted Pam Geller to know, that she does not speak for America. She does not speak for Jewish groups. She's simply a hate group. That's what the Southern Poverty Law Center has, and many others have described her as. She is not out as a champion of free speech. She's demonizing American Muslims. She's taking a cheap shot at Islam. And this is hate speech that incites violence. I was also trying to tell her, which I didn't get enough time to explain, of course, because I was getting interrupted 5 times in 30 seconds over there, that this is not just some rhetoric. You know, if you look at the Columbia professor, he was attacked. You look at those 6 people who were killed in the Sikh Gurdwara in Wisconsin. You look at these 3 young American students in Chapel Hill earlier this year. Muslims are being killed in this country because of Islamophobia, even Muslim lookalikes. So this kind of inflammatory speech, we know precisely what it will yield, and that's what the crux of my argument was.
Yeah, so let's see if we can kind of break down where we definitely agree and where maybe we have disagreements, and we'll explore that. I completely agree with you and the Southern Poverty Law Center that the American Freedom Defense Initiative, which is her group, is a hate group. I completely agree with you that her desire here is not merely to exercise free speech, but to make an attempt to demonize American Muslims based on what individuals in other countries have said. Now, to say that, let's get to the next point, which I think will be a more interesting one.
Yes.
Is quoting someone else hate speech if it is an accurate quote? Let's start there.
No, again, I don't think so. I think the only question you have to ask is, what is the consequence of that quote? John McCain, our presidential candidate, very famously with a smirk on his face, he said, bomb, bomb, bomb Iran. Imagine that quote with the US flag on an Iranian bus in Tehran. What would that do? I think it's just about the consequence. Again, I'm not against the law. I'm not saying that she should, by law, not be allowed. I'm not saying that the First Amendment should not allow that. But we as a society, the social code of our society, not the legal code, should at least stand up and say, this is nonsense. This is not free speech. The free speech comes with responsibility. Yeah, she has a right to be a bigot. We have a right to call her a bigot.
So I think that there's an interesting parallel here with what happened in Texas yesterday over the last couple of days, with the contest for Mohammed cartoons, which, by the way, also had Pam Geller involved there. And we talked about this yesterday, and I got 2 types of feedback from my audience. My point of view was, of course, it should be legal to draw cartoons of Mohammed. Of course, cartoons of Mohammed should not bring people to violence. That, to me, is absolutely deplorable. However, should we also have a sort of pragmatic consideration when we are doing Mohammed cartoons? And I merely ask the question, If you're drawing Muhammad cartoons only to agitate others, should we consider that differently? Now, I would still not consider it hate speech, and I would still say that it doesn't matter from the point of view of doing violence. If the goal is to inflame, you still should not commit violence based on that, but it still asks this question of, is it responsible free speech if it's meant only to agitate?
So here's the position of Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We're not asking for legal changes. We're not asking that it's against the law. But I'll give you 3 examples. In America, if somebody wanted to mock the Holocaust, we will not give them media attention. We will simply ignore them. If somebody came out and started calling African Americans N-word, yes, that's their free speech, but we will not turn them into media darlings. Nobody will pay any attention to that person. That person will be called a bigot and a racist. If someone came and started making homophobic slurs against the LGBT community, our social code will scrap it, not our legal code. That is precisely what American Muslims are trying to say, that the Prophet's sanctity, his honor, is just as dear to us as those 3 examples would be to those 3 communities. We're not asking for any special treatment. Why doesn't America get it? We're not asking for legal change. We are just saying, look at your conscience. Forget about the Constitution. I'm appealing to the American conscience. This is racism. This is bigotry. We are better than that.
Sure, and I think that there's a sort of second layer to this also that we could discuss, which is I got a bunch of emails from people after my commentary yesterday saying it might just be more pragmatic not to do this, because if the idea is to improve relations with the American Muslim community or Muslim communities around the world, this is certainly not going to help. And I was merely speaking from a pragmatic point of view. People emailed me and they said, David, here's what you're ignoring. If drawing a Muhammad cartoon is going to make someone go out and shoot a gun at somebody else, we actually should be exposing that. And it's an issue. So going at it from the angle that should be exposed to expose extremism. What do you think of that?
I think no, it's just there are 2 points. I think they're trying to expose a tender spot. There is no mystery there. They should come to me here in Baltimore and go to downtown and call an African American an N-word. They'll get a punch on their face. That's not exposing something. They already know this is a sensitive spot. Like the Pope said, if you make fun of my mother, you can expect a punch. Now, I'm not justifying the violence. I'm not justifying the killing. That is horrible. That is deplorable. Coming to the second point, yes, this is a battle for the hearts and minds of many, 99% peaceful Muslims. And we lose that battle when we support this kind of language. But I think there's a larger thing. The question is, what's in it for America? The bigger thing here for America is our own moral stature. We come across as hypocritical. We have made these accommodations for all other communities that I've just mentioned to you. But we are simply playing dumb to this idea somehow for the past 40 years that the sanctity, the honor of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a part of my faith. You're really hitting me a very tender spot. That's all we're saying. We're not saying that it should be above criticism. Yes, you can have a dialogue. Ahmadiyya Muslim community has called out Pam Geller multiple times. The way you want to talk about it, let's come to a university and divvy up our times and have a moderator and debate it. Yes, that's very American, would love to do that. But Pam Geller was a nobody before 2010. She has no expertise in Islam. And today she's a media darling.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, obviously, I completely condemn Pam Geller. I think as someone who considers myself a supporter of Israel, nothing Pam Geller has ever done in the name of supporting Jews or Israel has even remotely resonated with me. But once we sort of get her out of the way, I think there's a very fair discussion to have as to whether there should be, let me put it a different way. There's a lot of Jesus cartoons that are done all the time, and we simply don't see the same types of isolated reactions. Does that make it more okay to do Jesus cartoons because we're not seeing that same reaction? I guess that's where I think people are getting caught up, which is are the cartoons different of Muhammad and Jesus, Or is it the reaction that's different, which should guide what we do?
Well, there are multiple layers to the question, and this is a fascinating conversation, by the way. My point again, David, is we hurt at different places. My hurt could be in my belly, and your hurt could be in your eye. That does not mean that we all hurt. Jesus, for all the reasons that a Christian will have to explain, may not be a tender spot for a Christian. I don't know. That's for them to answer. All I'm saying is, for me, the prophet is a tender spot. So it cannot be, just because you don't hurt at the exact same place that I hurt does not invalidate or should not invalidate my hurt. And that's the precise thing. I'm a physician by profession. That's what I see every day. Patients hurt at different places. And it's the most insensitive thing for a physician to come and say, no, you don't have pain. And this is the thing. And some people will even argue that here is a different flip to it. Imagine a mob, a Muslim mob in your mind right now. Imagine on the streets of Afghanistan or Iraq, and imagine 10,000 people with beards extremely angry. You can imagine them burning an American flag. You can imagine them burning an effigy of an American president, but you can never imagine them burning Jesus Christ's effigy. Why? Because it has never happened. Why? Because in our faith, all prophets are dear and respectful. And even that angry mob will never say something blasphemous, horrific about Jesus, peace be upon him. That's our faith, and we are standing by that.
Very, very interesting conversation. We've been speaking with Dr. Faheem Younus, member of the executive body of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA and a senior fellow at the Hoffberger Center for Ethics at the University of Baltimore. Thank you again for being on.
Thank you very much, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
A huge bigot is now claiming that Christians are the new gays. This is the co-founder and former chair of the National Organization for Marriage, just a despicable organization. She wrote an open letter to Anthony Kennedy, Supreme Court Justice, because he is sort of the presumed swing vote that will decide what happens with the court's upcoming ruling about same-sex marriage, saying that the persecution of Christians over same-sex marriage is really, really bad. She's continuing this sort of grotesque and preposterous campaign against basic civility towards everybody. Since the dawn of time and practically from birth, in many cases, LGBT people have been stigmatized, ridiculed, treated as second-class citizens, verbally and physically attacked, stoned to death or otherwise murdered in the name of religion in some countries, forced to hide who they truly are, forced to marry people of the opposite sex to hide their sexuality. We know all about it, right, Lewis? So Maggie Gallagher comes out and she ignores all of that and says that basically Christians are now being discriminated against. She says Christians are the newly stigmatized. It's a completely farcical rewriting of history. She writes, "The forces of gay marriage are powerful. You have been their hero in the past when gay people were not so powerful. The tables are turned now, as I think is clear to everyone. The LGBT community has built a powerful cultural, legal, and political movement. They are not helpless or friendless. They do not need you to distort the Constitution to win the right to live as they choose. We, who believe in the traditional understanding of marriage, do need your help. We live at a time where our livelihoods are now under attack, when our standing as equal citizens is under attack, when the system of ideas and deep human realities that gave rise to marriage for millennia are now being dismissed as merely bigotry or irrational, incomprehensible hatred." This is one of the most delusional letters I've ever read with regard to gay marriage and so-called Christian persecution. First of all, with the exception of less than 24 non-discrimination cases around the country, like the cake bakers and the florists, there has basically been no attack of Christians expressing their beliefs. You can still be fired in tons of states merely for being gay. What sort of farcical fantasy land is Maggie Gallagher living in where gay people now have the power and the sort of immunity from discrimination, and it's Christians who need to be protected?
I think this is a common game that is played, and it's just the make yourself look like a victim game. I think when you're losing and you make other people afraid, you make yourself look like the victim, and that's how you try to defend your position, and it's not working. Yeah,
Christian conservatives really, 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 really want to be regarded as martyrs in their quest to deny LGBT people equal rights under the law. They're seeing that they're losing the legal battle. So the game now is writing letters that are completely disconnected from the real world to Supreme Court justices and using the religious freedom argument. I really hope it doesn't work. Let's wait and see first what the Supreme Court says, hopefully next month. It is coming up very, very quickly. Disaster in Pennsylvania. The New York Times is reporting that fracking chemicals have now been found in Pennsylvania drinking water sampled from 3 homes in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. They found traces of a compound found in Marcellus Shale drilling fluids, according to a newly published study. So the exact same thing that always happens is happening, which is the defenders of fracking say, this has nothing to do with fracking as a process. This is because the wells were faulty. And we heard this in the past, Lewis, when we had tainted water from fracking, which is, listen, there's nothing wrong with the process. It's that the wells are faulty. It's just an issue that we can easily fix.
Yeah, the process is what's causing the earthquakes, but the pollution is from the faulty wells. Right. We figured that out.
So there's two layers of analysis here, right? First layer of analysis is, couldn't this be because of undocumented leaks? Just because there haven't been announced leaks, that doesn't guarantee that it must be from a faulty well. There could be leaks that have been covered up. And the second layer is, even if it's true that the issue is well integrity rather than something inherent to the fracking process, shouldn't we be worried that there are numerous well integrity problems that are leading to fracking chemicals in drinking water? I don't see how saying, oh, it's not fracking, it's faulty wells that are leading to fracking chemicals showing up in our drinking water. That still seems like a concern.
Yeah, I mean, either the problem is that fracking is polluting drinking water, or a total lack of regulation is resulting in this disaster. And are we going to fix either of those things?
I have no idea. Remember that we don't need to be doing any of this. We could just be going in the direction of alternative renewable energy, but we're not. And if you look at a computer keyboard and look at what's above the number 4, you'll know exactly what's at play here, Lewis. I think people will be able to figure that one out pretty quickly. We have a voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. A lot of emails and voicemails about our big announcement that the show is moving to Boston. Here's one.
Hey, David. This is Amelia from Queens, New York, a long-time watcher. And I just wanted to say congratulations on the big announcement. I wish you the best in moving out of New York. Unfortunately, I didn't know you were living in New York.
Right.
But that's cool. Also...
Very good. Okay, so losing his train of thought there at the end. But yes, we were in New York for years, and the Eggman has one hypothesis about why we're moving out.
Hey, Dave. Are you moving back to Boston because you can't handle the urine smell of New York City? Man, it's an acquired taste that you just couldn't acquire. Too bad. Shalom.
Yeah, I deal much more with BO than with urine smell in New York City, but very, very clever from the Eggman, who lives in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. I assume there's very little urine smell up there. On today's bonus show, Smith College will accept some transgender students. It's a traditionally all-women's college. Blue Moon has been sued for deceptive advertising. We'll talk about that. And the NIH says no to embryo DNA modification. Huge and very interesting stories on today's bonus show. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership and make sure you're signed up to our newsletter because we will be announcing a really great membership special in the next day or two.
The The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.